أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Surah 77, Al-Mursalat. Title: The expression Al-Mursalat features in the opening verse of this surah and provides its title. Period of revelation. It emerges from the surah's contents that it must have been revealed in the early Meccan phase. On reading this surah together with the two preceding it, surahs Al-Qiyamah and Ad-Dahr, and the two following it, surahs
An-Naba'a
and
An-Nazi'at,
one ascertains that all five were sent down in the same period, for these spell out the same truths in a variety of ways for the admonition of the Meccans. Subject matter and themes. The surah affirms the truth of the last day and the day of judgment and warns the unbelievers against the consequences of rejecting the truth. Verses 1 to 7 adduce the arrangement of winds as a sign that bears out the veracity of the Prophet's tidings about the last day. It is inevitable, for God, the absolutely powerful, who has put in place the amazing arrangement for the blowing of the winds, can easily bring about the last day. The wisdom underlying the above system underscores the need for the hereafter, for there is a purpose behind every act of God. Without the afterlife, the present order loses its meaning and purpose. The Meccans repeatedly challenged the Prophet, peace be upon him, to bring upon them the last day against which he had warned them about. Verses 8 to 15, without mentioning this demand of theirs, say that the last day is not something trivial to be presented on demand. The day of judgment is for all humanity, and God has already fixed its date. When the last day comes, it will strike everyone so terribly that the unbelievers who are demanding that it come sooner will be utterly panic-stricken. The testimony of their messengers will then decide their fate, although they unabashedly reject their call for now. Only at that point would they realize how they had incurred their own self-destruction. Verses 16 to 28 present one argument after another for the need of the last day and the hereafter. Man's history, his creation, and the constitution of the planet Earth that he inhabits all testify to the possibility of and the divine rationale for the hereafter. It is evident from the annals of history that all those nations who disbelieved in the hereafter faced decline and destruction. If a nation rejects this doctrine, it invites self-destruction. The universe is governed not only by physical laws, but by moral laws too, which are at work. As a result, everyone is recompensed. In this present life, their recompense cannot be dispensed in full. The moral laws of the universe therefore demand a point of time when everyone shall be recompensed in full for all their good and evil deeds. It will compensate for the partial recompense in this world. Life after death is essential for this. Likewise, if one reflects on man's birth, he cannot dare to deny that God, who let him grow from an insignificant sperm drop into an adult human being, cannot bring him back to life. After death, the components of one's body do not vanish from the earth. Rather, these survive. Man is nourished from all that the earth produces, and after death he returns to the same earth. God, who had created man from clay in the first place, is quite capable of retrieving him from the earth after his death. One who reflects on God's power cannot deny this possibility. If one studies the issue in the light of God's wisdom, he will realize that he is perfectly justified in holding man answerable for the faculties he has granted to him. His infinite wisdom dictates that man be called to render his account. Verses 28 to 40 and 41 to 45 describe the fate of the unbelievers and believers respectively. The former refuse to accept the doctrine of the hereafter, and the latter strive to brighten their prospects in the next life, while they were still alive. They embrace faith and shun such errors of faith, thought, morals, actions, and conduct that destroy one's prospects in the hereafter. Finally, the unbelievers are warned that they may enjoy the pleasures of this world for a while, but they are destined for a terrible end. Whoever fails to derive guidance from the Quran cannot secure it anywhere else either.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate.
وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا
By the winds sent forth in quick succession,
فَالْعَاصِفَاتِ عَصْفًا
which then blow tempestuously,
وَالنَّاشِرَاتِ نَشْرًا
and raise clouds and scatter them around,
فَالْفَارِقَاتِ فَرْقًا
then winnow them thoroughly,
فَالْمُلْقِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا
and then cast Allah's remembrance in people's hearts,
عُذْرًا أَوْ نُذْرًا
to serve as an excuse or a warning.
1. That is, sometimes the failure of winds causes the people to be alarmed at the prospect of a famine, and they turn to Allah to repent of their sins. Sometimes they bring a lot of rain and the people turn to Allah in gratitude, and sometimes their blowing violently causes dread in the hearts, and the people turn to Allah from fear of destruction. In these verses initially the order of rain-bringing winds has been stated, which is thus: first, winds start blowing in succession, then they assume the proportions of a storm, then they raise the clouds and spread them, then they split and separate them. After this, instead of making mention of the rainfall, it is said that the winds infuse the hearts with the remembrance of Allah, as an excuse or as a warning. That is, it is an occasion when either because of fear man is compelled to remember Allah, or else he confesses his errors and invokes Allah to protect and save him from ruin and bless him with rain. If it has not rained for a long time, and the people are thirsty for rain, even the most hardened disbeliever sometimes begins to remember God when he sees the winds blowing and the clouds advancing. The droughts being mild and severe makes the difference. In case the drought is mild, the common man who is not far from Allah will remember him, but others will offer scientific explanations, saying that there was no cause for anxiety. It did not rain because of such and such a cause, and it would be weak-mindedness to start praying to God on such an ordinary thing. However, if the drought is unusually prolonged, and the whole country is faced with a calamitous situation, even the confirmed disbelievers begin to remember God. If they feel shy to use their tongue, in their hearts they feel penitent on their wrongdoing and ingratitude and pray to God to cause rain throughout the country from the winds which are raising the clouds. This is infusion of God's remembrance in the hearts as an excuse. As for its infusion as a warning, it happens when the wind develops into a cyclone and destroys settlement after settlement, or it rains so heavily as to cause a deluge. In such a state even a confirmed atheist starts imploring God out of awe for him, and then all scientific explanations of the cyclone or deluge evaporate from his mind. Thus, after describing the blowing of winds in their succession to say that they infuse the hearts with Allah's remembrance as an excuse or as a warning, is meant to impress the truth that the system working in the world keeps on reminding man that everything on the earth has not been placed under his control, but there is a supreme power above him, which rules his destiny. That power is so supreme and mighty that it can use the elements for the sustenance and nourishment of man when it so wills, and can use the same elements for his destruction when it so wills. After this, the same system of winds has been proffered as an argument to prove that the resurrection which is being promised to man must come to pass. Now, let us see how this system testifies to this truth. Man generally is perplexed in the case of resurrection and the hereafter at two questions. First, is the occurrence of resurrection possible? Second, what is its need and necessity? And then, being perplexed at these questions, he starts entertaining doubts whether it will at all occur or not, or whether it was only a figment of the imagination. In this connection, the Quran has at some places reasoned out and proved its possibility, its necessity and occurrence from the system of the universe, and at others adopted another mode of reasoning. Oaths have been sworn by some of the countless signs of God's kingdom, and it has been asserted that it shall surely come to pass. This mode of reasoning contains arguments for its possibility, as well as arguments for its necessity and arguments for its occurrence. Here, adopting the same mode of reasoning, only the system of the circulation of winds and rainfall has been presented as a sign of the truth that it is a regular system, which has been established by the design of an all-wise, almighty sovereign. It is not a chance occurrence, as a result of which a system might have been generated in the atmosphere of the earth that vapors should arise from the seas. Wind should carry them and gather them into clouds, then split and separate them into pieces and transport them to different parts of the earth, and then should cause them to fall as rain. This system has not been devised accidentally by some blind and deaf nature, but it is a well-considered and well-designed plan, which is functioning regularly according to a law. That is why it never so happens that the heat of the sun should produce ice on the surface of the sea instead of vapors. But the sun always raises only vapors from the sea. It never so happens that the monsoons should blow in the reverse order and suppress vapors into the sea, but they always raise them up into the atmosphere. It never so happens that the formation of clouds should cease, or the winds should stop to carry them to dry lands, or the falling of rain on the earth should discontinue. The same law has been at work since millions and millions of years under which this system is functioning. Had it not been so, our coming into existence on the earth and survival here would not be possible. In this system one finds a clear purpose and the working of a regular law. One can clearly see that on the earth the life of man, animal and vegetation deeply relates to the winds and rainfall, and this arrangement testifies that water has been provided to bring animate life into existence, and keep it alive precisely according to their requirements and a law. This purpose and regularity is not found only in this aspect but in the entire system of the universe, and man's whole scientific progress is based on it. About everything man tries to find out what is its purpose and on what principle it works. Then as he goes on gaining insight into the purposes of the creation of different things and the principles on which they work, he goes on devising new and ever new methods of their use and making new inventions for the progress of his civilization. Had there been no such concept in the mind of man naturally that the world is a meaningful world and everything in it is working on a principle, he would never have entertained the question about anything as to what was its purpose and how it could be put to use. Now, when this world and everything in it has meaning, and if there is a law working in this world and in everything it contains, and if it has been functioning with the same purpose and regularity since millions and millions of years, then a stubborn person only could refuse to accept that an all-knowing, almighty God has made it. And about that God it would be foolish to assume that although he could make and cause it to function but cannot break it, and after breaking it, cannot reconstruct it in any other form if he so wills. The concept about matter that it is imperishable was the chief support of the ignorant atheist of the past. But the progress of knowledge has proved it also false. Now it is an acknowledged scientific fact that matter can change into energy and energy into matter. Therefore, it is perfectly according to knowledge and reason that this material world will last only as long as the living and eternal God sustains it. As soon as he wills to change it into energy, he can change it by a simple command, and his one command is enough to recreate it into any other material form and shape he wills. This much then about the possibility of the resurrection, which cannot now be rejected by any scientific and rational argument. As for the question that it must take place so that man is rewarded for his good works and punished for his evil deeds, the person who acknowledges man's moral responsibility and also believes that rewarding the good services and punishing the crimes is the necessary demand of this moral responsibility, cannot but admit that there must be the hereafter. There is no law or government in the world which can punish every crime and reward every good act. To say that the prick of the conscience is a sufficient punishment for the culprit, and the satisfaction of the conscience is sufficient reward for the doer of good is no more than meaningless philosophizing. The question is, how and when did the conscience of the person who killed an innocent man, and then himself died in an accident immediately after it helped him? And when did the conscience of the man who went to fight for the sake of truth and justice and fell a victim to a bomb blast suddenly, have the satisfaction that he had laid down his life for a good cause? Thus, the truth is that the pretenses invented to avoid the belief in the hereafter are all meaningless. Man's intellect wants, his nature requires, that there should be justice. But in the present life of the world it is not possible to have full and perfect justice. Justice can be had only in the hereafter and only under the judgment and command of the all-knowing, omnipotent God. Denial of the necessity of the hereafter is, in fact, denial of the necessity of justice. Intellect can go only so far as to convince man that the hereafter is possible, and it should come about. As for the truth that it will surely come about, the knowledge of it can be obtained only through revelation, and revelation has given us the news that that which you are being promised must happen. We cannot attain this knowledge by intellectual reasoning, However, we can attain the certainty of its being true on the basis that the thing of which we are being informed by revelation is both possible and necessary.
إنما توعدون لواقع.
Surely, what you are promised shall come to pass.
2. Another meaning can be that which you are being threatened with, i.e., the resurrection and hereafter. 3. Here an oath has been sworn by 5 things on the inevitability of the resurrection. 1. Those which are sent forth in succession, or for a good cause. 2. Those which blow violently and tempestuously. 3. Those which disperse and scatter. 4. Those which split and separate. And 5. Those which inspire the remembrance. As these words only describe the characteristics, and it has not been specified what thing or things they qualify, this has given rise to a difference of opinion among the commentators as to whether these are the qualities of one particular thing or of different things and what the thing or things are. One group of them says that all the 5 are qualify the winds, the second group says that all the 5 imply the angels, the third group says that the first 3 imply the winds and the remaining 2 the angels. The fourth says that the first 2 imply the winds and the other 3 the angels. Another group has opined that the first quality implies the angels of mercy, the second the angels of punishment, and the remaining 3 imply the verses of the Quran. In our opinion, the first thing worthy of consideration is that when 5 characteristics have been mentioned continuously in one and the same context, and there is no indication to show as to what has been qualified up to a certain point and wherefrom has the qualification of another thing begun, it cannot be correct, on the basis of a baseless conjecture, to understand that in these verses oaths have been sworn by 2 or 3 different things. Rather, in this case, the continuity of the subject by itself requires that the whole passage be regarded as related to the characteristics of one and the same thing. Secondly, wherever in the Quran an oath has been sworn by a certain thing or things in order to convince the doubters or deniers of an unseen truth, there the oath stands for an argument, or reasoning which is meant to tell that the thing or things point to the truths being right and correct. For this purpose obviously it cannot be correct to present one imperceptible thing as an argument for another imperceptible thing. For only a perceptible thing can be presented as an argument for an imperceptible thing. Hence in our opinion the correct explanation is that it implies the winds, and the explanation of the people who interpret the 5 things to mean the angels cannot be acceptable, for the angels are as imperceptible as is the occurrence of the resurrection. Now, let us consider as to how these different states of winds point to the occurrence of the resurrection. One of the most important factors which has made animal and vegetable life possible on the earth is the air. The relationship its qualities bear with every kind of life testify that there is an all-powerful, all-wise Creator, who willed to create life on this earth and for this purpose created here a thing whose qualities exactly and precisely correspond to the requirements of the existence of living beings. Then, he did not only wrap up the earth and the air and left it alone, but by his power and wisdom characterized this air with countless different states, which are being regulated since millions and millions of years in such a way that they cause the change of seasons and weather. Sometimes it is close and sometimes a soft breeze blows. Sometimes it is hot and sometimes cold. Sometimes it brings clouds and sometimes it drives away clouds. Sometimes it causes pleasant gusts to blow and sometimes disastrous windstorms. Sometimes it brings beneficial rains and sometimes there is drought. In short, there are different kinds of winds which blow in their own time, and every kind serves one or the other purpose. This arrangement is the proof of a dominant power, for which neither it can be impossible to bring life into existence, nor to obliterate it, nor to recreate it after having annihilated it. Likewise, this arrangement is also a proof of a supreme wisdom about which only a foolish man could think that all this was being done for fun, without any higher object in view. As against this wonderful system man is so helpless that he can neither cause a favorable wind to blow for himself, nor can prevent a disastrous cyclone from blowing on himself. However shameless, obstinate, and stubborn he may be, the wind does at one time or another remind him that a mighty sovereign is ruling over him, who can turn this principal means of his life into a cause of blessing for him, or into a cause of ruin for him whenever he so likes, and man does not have the power to prevent or avert any of his decisions. For further explanation see N. 7 of Surah Al-Jathiyah, E. and S. 1-4 of Surah Ad-Dariyat.
So when the stars are extinguished,
وَإِذَا السَّمَاءُ فُرِجَتْ
And the sky is rent asunder.
4. That is, when they lose their light and luster. 5. When the heaven is rent asunder, when the system and discipline of the heavens under which every star and planet is established, and moving in its orbit, and everything in the universe is adhering to the bounds set for it, is broken.